Biggest thing, you don't want to give an answer right away, and if you're able to, answer their question with another question. And also that along the process, it's going to be very uncomfortable talking to the sellers, asking the questions that you need to, and digging for pain, but that's going to come with experience. So
okay, I can hear you now.
If you're struggling,
Hi, Manny.
I think this is the event that you need to come to make sure that you take your business to the next level.
You're cutting in and out.
It's a good question, Steve.
So halfway through the show, we're going to have something along those lines. It's like 90 seconds. So I don't think we
Welcome to the Disruptors Selling System. Obviously, I believe in sales. I'm teaching this course. I'm very passionate about sales. But I readily recognize that our sales stuff does not matter until we're able to market effectively. There's a saying that professionals sift and sort and amateurs convince. But when people think of salespeople, they don't get the warm and fuzzies. And so we need to make sure we're separating ourselves from what the typical salesperson sounds like. I don't know what it is, but it seems like every salesperson has that same melodic tune when they're calling people and saying, "How you doing today?" As you can see, we really try to do everything we can to not sound like a salesperson. Now, I fully embrace my role as a salesperson. Salespeople are needed in this world. In our program, you're gonna learn how to book more appointments from the existing marketing you're already doing. You're gonna learn how to get more contracts signed, and ultimately, learn how to get more of those contracts across the finish line, because we know we don't get paid for signed contracts, we only get paid for closed escrows.
What's the headline here?
Let's get started.
The headline. Startup to succession.
Startup to succession. Do you feel you're there yet?
Yeah.
His sales training is unbelievable, right? There is other sales training in theory. No other way to get this type of access with someone who's such an open book about every little thing that is completely applicable to my business.
Anyone who wants to bring their business to the next level, anyone who wants to close 30, 40, 50% more of the deals, I mean, there's no one who wouldn't benefit from being better at sales.
I mean, anyone in real estate, anyone that has any entrepreneur that has a business, not all the information may be presented to you, but time management, knowing how to work with people, having sales skills, because I think we're all in sales and marketing, and it could present to anybody, honestly.
With this,
I would have to say it's asking questions. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to give an answer right away, and if you're able to, answer their question with another question. And also that along the process, it's going to be very
If you're struggling, I think this is the event that you need to come to make sure that you take your business to the next level.
Welcome to the Disruptors Selling System. Obviously, I believe in sales. I'm teaching this course. I'm very passionate about sales. But I readily recognize that our sales stuff does not matter until we're able to market.
Jump on the Steve train. We real estate disruptors.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for today's episode of Real Estate Disruptors. Today we have my great friend Eric Brewer with the Brewer Method, and he flew in from York, Pennsylvania. Talk about going from startup to succession, which, doing 3,000 plus transactions, 400 plus a year. Have a little knowledge about all that. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm Steve Trang, sales trainer, and every month we help hundreds of people buy more houses at deeper margins. If you want to join us on our training calls, DM me the word sales on Instagram. And I am on a mission to create 100 millionaires. And the information on this podcast alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. If you'll take consistent action, you will become one. And the show is brought to you by our sister company, InvestorLift. Get access to over 2 million cash buyers across the country. Go to investorlift.com, put in disruptors to get 10% off. And if you get value today, please tag a friend below. Share this episode right now. That way we can all grow together. And don't forget, we do have Parting the Disruption tomorrow which is always a little bit of fun, a little bit of chaos. And this is a live show, so ask your questions for Eric to answer. You ready?
Yeah, man, I'm ready.
All right. So it's been a year and a half, almost 2 years
Yeah.
since you were last out.
Yes.
Things have changed a little bit since we last met.
A little bit. Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of external change, a little bit of internal change, but yeah, things are shaking up a little bit.
Yeah. So can you walk us through what has been some of the biggest changes you've experienced in the last year and a half?
So I think a year and a half ago, I was just onboarding my current COO, and trying to think about like the last time I was here versus now. There was a certain anxiousness about me back then, right? I think a lot of it had to do with, if you think about the timing of October, right? To your point, it was towards the end of the toilet paper crisis, or what's known as COVID.
Yeah.
And I had recently just transitioned out of my current COO, which in my organization, that person runs the company, right? Like I was relatively hands off for the most part.
The company or the companies?
The company at that point, for us, we had one or two entities outside of our core business, but effectively 90% of our resources were allocated towards our home buying business. And that was hard, right? Like hard because I felt like I had failed. I either hired the wrong person or had the right person and didn't manage and lead them effectively to keep them around. So I was just really struggling with trying to identify what happened, and was super excited about my new COO, but it was so new and so fresh.
Yeah.
And, it's easy to think back and say, well, when I hired the last guy, I was excited about him too. And that ended, not ideally. We parted amicably, but it was disruptive.
Yeah.
So back then there was this anxiousness, there was this tension about me, because I watched the video last week just to prepare to be here. And I was like, man, I'm in a different place right now. I'm more relaxed. I feel like I have a little bit more clarity about where I am and where I'm headed. I'm healthier. I feel better. I think I look better, but I'll leave that up to you.
Subtly. So, I think that there is that fear, right? You're talking about, you got the COO, didn't work out the way you were hoping. You get this new one, and you're like, how much is it you? How much was it process, environment, whatever?
Yeah.
So obviously Benmont is still with you, and man, he's an incredibly valuable asset.
Yeah.
So what do you think some of the things that you've done to grow yourself? Because I think if it doesn't work out, oftentimes we got to look at maybe you weren't the right leader for the previous COO. So what have you done to make sure you're a better leader today?
It's a great question. And I think where I ended up was I gave full responsibility for why that relationship ended to that person. Because at that time, he effectively made the decision that he didn't want to grow into what I needed the COO to be. Because we went through this phase where I talk a lot about level 5 leaders, right? There's a level 1, which is you're a skilled person. Level 2 is you're a member of a team, right? You're able to do your job at a skilled level. Plus, you can actually work alongside other people.
You can work with other human beings.
You can work with other humans. It's from Jim Collins, by the way. Level 3 is you become a competent manager. And he was like that competent manager, and I needed him to move to like that executive leader. And then level 5 leadership is where you talk about the paradoxical combination of this undying belief that we can accomplish everything, but the ability to stare brutal facts and the truth in the face, right? It's tough to be able to do. Jim actually says that charismatic leaders oftentimes fail more often than folks that are a little bit more of a realist. Kind of a crazy combination, right?
Yeah.
So you got to try and buffer your charisma. And I think I was crystal clear about what happened, but took full responsibility for the fact that the 2.5 years that he worked for me, I failed to lead and develop him to the person that was prepared to move to that next level of leadership. So that was helpful for me to just have that clarity. And it really made it, I think, I wouldn't say easier for me, but it made the hiring process of Benmont that much easier.
Yeah.
Because I knew where I was at that particular phase in my leadership journey. I knew I needed someone that would be willing to sort of deal with my issues, we'll say,
Yeah.
but also would be willing to grow with me. And he's proven to be, I mean, he's become basically my best friend, which is something I talk a lot about with people that I think when we think about who our number two would be, I'm a firm believer that you don't have to start off as best friends, but you really should have a relationship with that person where they are part of your top 3 to 5 people in your circle.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're saying there because, you know, I myself was having a hard time letting go in my own business, which is crazy, right? Because I don't like to do a lot of things, but I was still having a hard time letting go. And what I did was I brought in, you know, Larry Yash and Annie was still the team leaders. And like, I was like, all right, if I bring them in, you know, they can help everyone else grow, then I can finally let go. And what we learned was how bad of a leader I was.
Yeah.
Right. And it forced me to elevate my leadership. And it was really cool was, you know, to get messages from my team yesterday, like, you know, like we're really excited to see how much you've grown and allowed us, right, to rise up with it. So
it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
The hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about, you know, some of the consulting and leadership and coaching that I've done now. And it's been the most difficult thing because it requires you to virtually abandon all of the behaviors that got you to the place to where you deserve to hire someone in order to earn the right to retain that talent. You need to be the opposite of the person that you were when you created the opportunity. I said this by accident. I was out working with a friend of ours, Marcus Krigler, who's in CG. And we were going through this part and I was helping him through his quarterly and he had this group of tasks. And I don't think Marcus will, you know, it's nothing bad. But he's like, no, I'll take that. I'll take that. And I'll take that. I was like, hey man, like we got a list of like 73 things here for you to get done this quarter. Do you think maybe we've put you in a bad spot? And he goes, I just want to save them the hassle of having to do the work. And I said, you're not saving them from the work. You're cheating them from the opportunity.
Yeah.
And he was like writing it down. And then he said it to me later. He's like, dude, that thing that you said to me was just eye-opening. And that's what happens is that we have such a sometimes obsessive behavior over being in control when we build a business or we start this entrepreneurial journey. And then the instant you hire your first person, you need to start to unwind that.
Right.
And it's hard because you're like, well, that's not what got me here.
That what got you there is also not what you observe from other people as well.
Yeah.
Right. Like we didn't necessarily grow up and learn our business.
Dude, I grew up in the car business in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. I had phones thrown at me. I got MF'd like literally every day. And I was a good salesperson.
Right.
So think about how they treated the guys like you that didn't sell a lot. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But no, like I literally
that's
like
our model.
It was how we were raised a little bit differently. It's how we grew up in business. But no, things are certainly different. And I don't think people have changed. You know, everybody talks about millennials this and millennial that. I think just today, people are less likely to be treated like I was crap.
Yeah, they're less tolerant of it.
Yeah. I almost dropped the S word there. I wasn't sure about the profanity policy, but
you know, going back to your point though, you're talking about all the different levels, right? Like for me, we're going over this as a team yesterday. Like I think as an individual contributor, I believe I was excellent, right? As a follower, I think I was pretty good.
Yeah.
And then once I got to management, I was like, there's some holes we need to fix before we move up.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the show is from startup to succession.
Yeah.
So before we jump into the path, can you explain what succession means? Because our general audience is still working on their first 10 to 50 deals.
So I think succession can really take on one of a couple different things, right? Like I think about succession in my business two potential ways. I have almost a half dozen kids, right? I have 5. I'm probably working on, not probably, I'll have a 6th child by the next time you invite me back.
Too much time, got it.
And so succession for me may mean creating a legacy of a business that has a big enough purpose and a big enough impact that my children would want to work at a business that I've built. Not have to, not be forced to, not have that be their best option. Like I literally think about my 18-year-old son, and he'll probably go to college and be out in the workforce in 4 years. Like there's no bigger compliment for me to be able to accomplish 2 things. One, create a business that is his dream job.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
Yeah, that's
think
huge.
about that for a second, because I think it says two things. One, they want to be part of what's going on, right? It's like, I mean, they got great culture over there. Those people are incentivized. They celebrate success. There's accountability. Like they create these paths for you to constantly level up. And then I think it also says something about what he's observed about me being part of that business and
Yep.
running that business for 20 plus years. Is that, hey, like I kind of like how my dad turned out.
Mm-hmm.
And if that was part of his journey, I wouldn't mind following in his footsteps. So succession for me could mean creating a business that my kids could participate in and would want to participate in, and to give me the ability to step away and still have Benmont run it.
Yep.
They would have to start at the entry-level position. My son works there in the summer, and he's a gopher. He runs for construction materials, right? So he would have to apply for a position there, qualify, and win the position no different than anybody else.
Yep.
I think he's a smart enough kid and a hard enough worker. We'd find a place for him. And then the second succession would be, and we talk about this a lot, and the one thing I wish I could go back and do differently is now I have the luxury sometimes of sitting with some people that have built some extraordinary businesses, sometimes outside of real estate, whether it's a chain of coffee shops. There's a young man with me here today that him and his wife own a chain of boutique coffee shops throughout the Phoenix area, right? It's pretty cool. I've met some people that are in venture capitalists, that they're private equity, and they start a business with succession in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like they actually won't go into the business unless they have a clear path to get to an exit. So if I were to go back and do this all over again, I would have started my business with the exit in mind. And the only thing that would have changed is I would have progressed as a leader. I would have put more emphasis and focus on systems and processes and removed myself from the business sooner than I feel like I've been able to without that in mind.
You know, something I've heard quite a bit is that wholesaling is a young man's game.
Mhm.
And the idea is just to wholesale, generate enough active income so you can buy enough rental property so you can live off the passive income.
It's a great path, yeah.
Right? But you're saying put a little bit more thought into it, you know, create an ideal outcome for you and your business.
Yeah, so I've been paying attention. I think one of the things that'll be next for me, you actually introduced me. There's a gentleman that teaches you how to flip businesses.
Mhm.
I saw on the page the other day, because I went through the course, there was a guy that 2 years ago bought a power washing business. Some might say that that's a young man's business too,
Yeah.
right? You're on TikTok. I'm a consumer. You're a content provider. I watch it. And I'm fascinated when a guy like runs the wand across the sidewalk, right? And all the little dirt disappears and it's in a straight line. And I'm watching, and it's mostly kids that spend $5,000 on a trailer and some startup equipment. Then they show you like what they make, right? As a power washer, a one-man business. So I saw this power washing business that exited at $4 million.
Wow.
They sold a power washing business for $4 million.
Yeah.
Because that guy went into that business and he bought it at he bought it for $300,000, which was 1 year's worth of income. So he bought it from that owner because it had $300,000 worth of net money, which by any measure, a $300,000 net business is a great business. It would probably put you in the top 1%.
Yeah.
But it was only worth $300,000 because that person was the business. He didn't have systems. He didn't have processes. He didn't have a leadership team. He didn't have a marketing strategy. He didn't have a core customer. So this guy came in and put systems and processes in, hired people, got it up to, say, $1 million worth of net profit. So he 3x'd the profit. But now someone said, I'd like to own that business. And I could buy it and never show up at the office and get a check for $1 million a year.
Yeah.
So he went into that with an exit in mind. And I think you can do that in wholesale. I think you could structure the business in a way to where it is sellable, because what's really different from wholesale than power wash or a coffee shop or anything else? It's just historically, I think, because of the lucrative nature of the wholesale business, you could operate and be profitable in spite of yourself, right? Like you literally,
the margins are so large.
yes, you can do one deal a month and cold call. Like if you sit and you cold call 4 hours a day and do one deal a month, you can net $25,000 a month and make $300,000.
Yeah.
Like that's not bad.
No, it's
right?
great.
So what happens is the market and the business has been so forgiving for so long, no one ever had to set it up like a real business. You could operate it for as long as you decided you wanted to and make a lot of money. And in our circle, people have always said these businesses are not sellable. And about 3 years ago, I accepted that as a challenge. And I think it's sellable. We've just never run them in a manner that's permitted us to sell them. It's we've never made it to where anybody would want to go. And we're always stressed out. And it's like, I couldn't wait to buy that business, right? It's like, I'm going to buy that wholesale business. That dude's always stressed out and worrying about where his next check's going to come from. And some months he makes 200 grand, and other months he makes 8.
Or loses money.
Right. Yeah. So I think if you start with the end in mind, the wholesale business can be something you can exit from in a reasonable amount of time.
So let's talk about what are some of the major milestones between startup to succession.
So I would say for me, and I know it might seem premature, but it is 100% the right people. And when you look at our business, right, it's effectively a sales organization. And so when you look at the positions, and we talked about this on Pardon the Disruption, right? Like we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago, is what would be your first hire? There was 2 or 3 different opinions, but what we cannot dispute is that hiring the right people, regardless of if your first hire is an EA or a VA or an IPA, whatever the heck it is, right? Like, make sure you define what the right person looks like. And for me, that's typically they have to be a great example of our core values. They got to be an ideal team player. It's a good book. It's they got to be humble, hungry, and smart. And smart refers to EQ, not necessarily IQ. We look at predictive index and DISC and make sure that that person matches up with the right behavioral profile to fit in that position, and that they have a good cognitive ability. In real estate, you got to be a quick learner no matter the position. And if you're committed to doing that, and I posted this the other day and got a lot of good feedback. It was an excerpt from one of Jim Collins' books that I'm reading, and he said, you can't motivate the wrong people. Right? But what you can do is hire the right people and manage them in a way that they never become unmotivated.
That's powerful.
Because that's a lot of times what happens.
Yeah.
Possibly what happened with one of the 3 COOs that I let down over the course of a 7-year time frame is I might have hired the wrong person and then either not given them enough leadership or gave them too much management, right? Where I didn't give them enough freedom. And I might have unmotivated that person.
Yeah, it's something that I learned again recently from Larry Yatch, just talking about like there's control centric where I got to be in your business, right? And then there's empowerment centric where just like, all right, Eric, do whatever. And what happens often is that we're either too control centric, or we're too hands off, and we got to find that right balance depending on the team member.
It's funny, right? It's always that balance, like we was talking about, like the paradox of having visionary confidence that you can accomplish anything that you set your mind to, but the willingness to stare the brutal facts in the face and allow people to give you the truth. And by the way, like shout out to Larry and Annie Yatch, right? Like when you talk about, for those of you who don't know those people, like when you talk about leadership and execution, like my man operated as a SEAL team leader. Right. So when you talk about the high stakes of operating a mission, it's life or death.
Failure was very expensive.
Yeah. So it's it's amazing. I've done some training with them. I'm actively trying to figure out the timing of them coming in and working with our team and working with me one-on-one to help us, because he's got that whole new facet of the thing. Is it used to just be leadership. Now he has that whole business aspect where he ties in what he's learned about leadership into business. So for anybody that's looking for leadership training, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to Larry and Annie Yatch.
So one thing you talked about is make sure you hire correctly, right? We've all heard hire slow and fire fast. We've all heard it. But a lot of us that are solo operators or run really small organizations say, I don't have time to hire the right way. Like I just need somebody now. I need to grow now, or I need to scale now.
Yeah.
What are you telling them?
I mean, I think it's almost obvious. Like if you just ask that question and step away, they'll figure it out on their own.
Right.
The reason you don't have time to hire the right person is because you've hired the wrong person probably just prior to this, right? I just read a book I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but it's a CEO who only does 3 things. He talks about people, culture, and numbers.
Trey Taylor.
Yeah, Trey Taylor. Great book,
Yeah.
right? People, culture, numbers. Like as a CEO or a business owner, even if you're the most important thing you can do is take time to hire the right person. So here's the other caveat that I would say to that, though I think a lot of people give that advice, but they'll omit the fact that there's an urgent aspect of it. If you're constantly recruiting, you'll never be in a position to where you have to hire someone out of an urgent demand and not have the time to get the right person. So one of the things that you and we spoke at CG and talked about this, right? Because of our activity on social media, I put up a post the other day just to show you the stark difference between someone that is active on social media and someone is not. I'm mildly active on social media, right? Put out 1 or 2 videos a day. I try and teach whatever I feel like I'm qualified to
that's
teach.
pretty active.
It's mildly compared to you, right? And I put up a video Wednesday of last week that we were hiring for 2 sales positions. And I said, and one of the things that here's a small piece of advice I've learned that has worked well for me. When I look at job descriptions, that's 95% saying this is what you have to contribute to the company. You need to be able to do this. You got to be able to do this. This is how you should behave. And it's like,
boring.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't you tell me what it's like to work there? I'd like to flip the script. Let me tell you 90% of this job posting, what it's like to work here. Here's our training. We offer something, Ben Mott's idea. We launched 2 great ideas he had that only 2 though. He's only had 2 great ideas. Everything else was mine. But there was 2 that we implemented this year that we've seen a phenomenal response to. One was if we're at 100% or higher of current monthly revenue goal, everybody's off Friday at 1:00. It's the response has been amazing. So I'm in Pennsylvania, right? In the summer, it's the only time you can ever go outside. You guys have summer weather here all year. But in December, like people are in pain. It's so cold, right? So we try and make the most out of the summer. So if you're off at 12 o'clock on a Friday, you can go to the beach when you might not be able to do that at 5 o'clock. You can go, spend extra time with the family or do something. So we've seen a tremendous response to that. Number 2 was we introduced perk days, which is your work anniversary is now a day off. Your wedding anniversary is a day off.
Yeah, I saw that.
Your birthday.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's just, so we've really tried to, that's when you go into talking about when you hire the right people, your primary job is to just make sure they never leave.
Yeah.
So we're constant. We believe we have great people. We want them to stay forever. So we act as if we're constantly trying to recruit them. Bottom line is social media, when we talk about stuff like that, and I put that job ad out there, I said, here's all of the things that we'll offer you. And there was 2 sentences about what you need to do. Like to have some experience in sales, but it's not necessary. It'd be cool if you understood real estate, but if not, we'll teach you.
Yeah.
But you need to align with our core values. Make sure when you send me an email to include your resume and 2 examples of how you're humble or you're excellent and you're committed to improvement or you've shown integrity. I got, Steve, 20 overqualified applicants. Door-to-door salespeople. It's got to be the hardest thing to do in the world.
Yeah.
And they make a lot of money, right? I got someone that was actually drafted in the professional lacrosse league, drafted as a professional. I didn't even know that existed. Super competitive guy, sold, life insurance policies, which is a cutthroat business. So just got overwhelmed with qualified applicants, didn't even put an ad out on Indeed or Facebook or anything. Meanwhile, I'm talking to a coaching client who's had an ad out for 3 months for an acquisitions agent in California and can't sniff a qualified applicant. Only real difference between our businesses, I'm visible on social media. He doesn't even log in to Facebook.
So we're looking for humble people. Would you and I qualify for this role?
Yeah.
Yeah, you think so?
I don't know, man. I think, I feel like you just kind of came at me there for a second. But I would say that I'm humble. I mean, I am confident, but I try and live by the mantra of taking credit for nothing and the blame for everything.
Yeah.
So maybe forced humility, because I've learned it's just the best way to lead people.
Yeah.
But on camera, I'm very humble. after the show, I may make a couple parting comments that might not sound like the most humble guy in the world.
So
but,
let's go on to the next step. So step one, hiring the right people. And we kind of dove a little bit into like how to hire them.
Yeah.
What after that, because we're talking about like, this is like a wide thing, right? Like to go from startup to succession is not like a small venture. This is.
So there's a couple creative things that I just had before I came here today. I was working with someone on preparing for their Q4 priorities. And they were talking about a particular candidate. And they said, well, what happens if we bring this person in and they learn everything about the business and they leave, right? So that's one of the things that I think is a constant sort of back and forth in this business is we hire people, they come in, they're a maverick, they're a venturer, they learn the business and then they leave. So some people have responded to that and gone the exact opposite direction. And they've hired a bunch of less than assertive people and put them in sales positions and then wonder why they struggle because they're so concerned that they'll hire an aggressive, assertive person that'll leave. So two things. One, if someone comes to work for me and they do a good job and 2 years later we outgrow the relationship, I feel fortunate that I got 2 years worth of good work out of them. It's not the worst thing in the world, especially if you're constantly recruiting because you'll have a bench of people that would gladly step up. So in our acquisitions department, we've actually created our lead management inside sales is like the G League for acquisitions. We hire salespeople in lead management, which is where I think a lot of people make mistakes. They try and hire administrative people that can answer the phone but aren't really good at sales. Hire an aspiring acquisitions agent that can learn sales, teach them how to be a lead manager, and in a year and a half, roughly, I've seen the last 3 acquisitions agents that we've had have come through lead management.
If I was reading correctly, you guys allow your lead managers to be nationwide. So are your acquisition managers then?
No, because we're all in person.
So how would
for
that
acquisitions? How would what work?
If they're starting as a lead manager in another state, how would they become an acquisition manager?
They probably they would have less of ability to be able to make that transition.
Got it.
And not every person that comes into lead management wants to be in acquisitions.
Right.
I've often said that like the perfect lead manager is someone that can get them all the way up to the appointment, but feels a little uncomfortable when it's time to make them a decision.
Yeah.
So we actually so I think we don't call them lead managers. We call them inside sales reps because we want them to think like, be treated like, and behave like a salesperson. We compensate them like salespeople. We train them like salespeople. We hold huddles like salespeople. Lead manager to me is like a person that's organizing like data and placing it in places, and it's like a warehouse manager. An inside sales rep is a salesperson. Their sale is the appointment.
Yeah.
The quality appointment means they've made a sale. Does that make sense? But back 100%. To my original point, when you're talking about like the maverick and hiring the people, you can hire a maverick or a venturer person. Let's just call it what it is. They're an entrepreneurial style person, but you need to create an atmosphere inside of your organization that is conducive to an entrepreneur. So as a leader, one of the things that you can do to push those people out of your organization is you hire a maverick or a venturer. Why do we normally do that? Because we don't have a sales process. We don't have training. So we need someone that'll just figure it out. Right? And then we're surprised that after they figure it out, they're risky enough to go out and try it on their own. So if you hire a maverick or a venturer, which is a great sales profile, right? You have to constantly create a higher ceiling for those people, or they're going to feel like they got to go out and do something on their own.
So 2 things here. First, I noticed you say maverick venture, but you didn't mention captain.
Yes.
So you don't put captain in that category?
No.
All right. Second question for everyone that's listening. What the heck is a maverick and a venturer?
So I use predictive index. It's a behavioral assessment. A maverick is they break it down into A, B, C, D. If you look at DISC, it's D-I-S-C. A maverick is a very assertive, mostly very social, impatient person that doesn't pay attention to details.
Yeah, it's a straight line, right? D-I-S-C.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
When then the captain is, they have some observation and some desire to be more precise. I definitely see a distinct difference between a venturer and a maverick and a captain. Captains are much more stable people.
Yeah.
But so
they're
that's
more
what it is.
normal mavericks.
Yes. Yes.
And a venturer is what?
Pretty much the same as a maverick, just a slightly skewed. I don't know which one it is between A, B, and C, but I feel like a venturer's probably that might actually be a more exaggerated version of a maverick. I'd have to look at the difference between the two. They're very similar, very entrepreneurial spirited people that are super assertive. I would put maverick and venture almost identical. Captain, much different. They're much more organized.
So I think when we got into this, we were talking about like you have people that have had mavericks and venturers and got burned.
Yeah.
And the lesson they took from it was
not to hire them.
Not to hire those. Not to grow the process, not to have build an environment that supports them, but to just stop hiring them.
Yes. And then they go and hire the opposite. It's like a rebound after a bad breakup with your girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
So they go and then hire the opposite of a maverick or a venturer or those particular profiles, and they end up with sometimes untrained, undisciplined, unassertive salespeople, which is doomed for failure.
Right.
So if you hire those people, they can succeed. We've had a lot of success with some of the more promoter type profiles, which are way less assertive, or someone who is more of a strategist that's very disciplined when it comes to process. But then we hold them accountable to the sales process. So they don't have the instincts to close a sale, but they have the discipline to a process that says, now's the time to ask for the sale.
Yeah.
So any real profile can fit. It's just a matter of what atmosphere, what culture, what type of process, what type of accountability do you have. But generally in a wholesale company, we hire mavericks and venturers because we have no process, we have no accountability, and they're likely to figure it out.
Yeah.
But once you have systems and processes and accountability and coaching in place, you can hire a milder version of that maverick or continue to hire that person and just know that you're going to constantly have to create a higher ceiling for that person, or they're going to feel like they've outgrown the opportunities that you provide, and they're going to go out on their own.
So we talked about, the people component. What else is involved in trying to build a company with succession in mind?
It's something that for me was always this elusive, like purpose and core values and things of that sort. And I've spent like the last 2 years really diving into leadership. And because of how big of an impact my lack of leadership, had on my life and my business, each time that I made that transition, I've been through 3 executive level COO integrator style people until I got to my 4th and now feel like I had a better understanding of the expectations of the position and I was able to improve as a leader to properly support that person. And I would say that probably the biggest difference for me along those lines. Repeat the question for me again, so I make sure I answer specifically.
About, like the next step after people.
So purpose, right? So as I've dug into that, I've learned just how important it is. And it's not something when we start the business, we go, what market are you in? What's your number one lead strategy? Right. And are you virtual in person? No one says, hey, what's your company purpose? But it's literally what people care about almost as much, if not more, than how much they're paid. Like we've seen, I spend a lot of time with Sharper Business Solutions and stuff like that. And part of our Empire curriculum is companies that lead with purpose outperform their peers by 120%.
Yeah.
It's what gets people to work at a place longer for less money when they get that emotional paycheck in addition to the financial paycheck. So some of that stuff is, sort of a brash car guy that grew up in the car business. We didn't talk about touchy-feely stuff like purpose. But we went through the exercise of defining our company's purpose. And then part of what Larry and Annie teach is how you have nested purpose at each one of the departments and how they feed up into the purpose of the company. And then each individual has their own purpose. Like why are you here? When you leave, what would you want people to say about you when you're gone?
Yeah. And I think, just finding and understanding people's purpose, they now feel like they're a part of the mission. So we've talked about hiring and so on. Before I forget, you've got a great video on your company's purpose and everyone's individual's purpose. And that is the best reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
Demonstrating that you believe in purpose. So that's hiring. Now, one of the less fun parts of running a business is letting people go. So can you talk about accountability and what leads to them, self-eliminating from the company?
Yeah, so I read this actually, and I think it was in the CEO that only does three things, Trey
Taylor.
And he actually put it into a unique perspective, and he was talking about people that aren't performing, or they're having maybe some personality conflicts with coworkers, and how we struggle sometimes with that. And I've struggled with that as a business owner before, where I hold on to relationships longer than I probably should because I feel bad. And he actually said in there, and I might not get the words exactly right, but hopefully the point will come across. There's nothing more cruel than to keep somebody in a position to where they feel underappreciated when they're not winning, and then understanding how that has an impact on their life when they leave.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to firing, one of the things that we've, I think, done a really good job with people when they're not performing is we always eliminate two things. And this comes from, tons of business studies that you can go out and you can Google it and say 80% of the time when someone's not performing, it's two things: lack of clear expectations or insufficient training and resources. So the instant that someone's not performing, we go, hey, we just want to restate the expectations. Are they crystal clear? And then we give them an opportunity to weigh in before we ask them to buy back in, right? A lot of times we go, these are the expectations. You're crystal clear, aren't you? We're just not asking a question that's going to make it okay for them to give us the truth, right? So that's where you get, I call compliance versus commitment. And that shows up in results very different.
Yeah.
If someone's walking around this office and they're complying with your vision, that doesn't show up the same way as someone that's committed to it.
Yeah.
So we eliminate clear expectations, and then we also make sure that we've given them proper training and they have access to resources. They might not have the right tech, or they might not have the right piece of equipment or something like that. 80% of the time when someone's not performing, it's one of those two things. So when they're not performing, we restate expectations, make sure that they're committed, and get clarity around the fact that they have all the resources and the training that they need. That's typically a verbal conversation. If they don't make an improvement, we have a written, what we call PIP, or performance improvement plan, where we now document the expectations and say, hey, here's the expectation of improvement over this next 30-day time frame. And if we don't improve in this area by X amount, then the next appropriate action would be this, whatever that is. And then normally by the time you get there, they're going to opt out. If they're not the right person, they're going to say, hey, listen, I'm crystal clear in the expectations. Just don't think I'm cut out for it.
Yeah.
And you've done that person a service. We always feel bad when we terminate a relationship. But if they can't do the job or don't want to do the job, to Trey's point, it is cruel to hold them hostage to that position. You're keeping them from doing something they'd be far better at, that they could probably make more money, that wouldn't impact their personal life and happiness the way that this does.
Might be easier for them to actually do.
Heck yeah.
So two different things here. So you keep mentioning Trey Taylor.
Yeah.
So we're working on getting him on the show. The other thing, you were mentioning compliance versus commitment.
Yeah.
You're going to do this, right? That's the we're kind of forcing it on them. So you actually recommended a book that was profoundly impactful for me, which is that Leadership is Language.
Yeah.
Right. So that Navy admiral or captain, where he talks about asking questions that gets buy-in versus asking suggestive questions that get buy-in, and they're two totally different things.
Like an actual question, not a statement with a question mark at the end.
Right.
They're two different things. And again, I'm reading a really good book right now, Jim Collins, and he talks about Winston Churchill, right? When he was leading his troops, and he had an information department. And their only responsibility was to come and report the brutal facts about the reality of their situation. And we don't often set that up or have that present inside of our business. And I've been like that multiple times, where I've been like, I don't want to hear the bad news. It's going to mess up my vibe, right? It's just going to kill my positive momentum or my outlook. But you can't fix what you don't know is broken. And Leadership of Language is a really good book, and it's changed a lot about how I communicate with people, because I was getting compliance, not commitment.
Well, you and I have pretty strong personalities. We're both visionaries. So when we say, this is what we're going to do, everyone kind of goes on. And I say, it's like, hey, you're in, right? Like, yes.
That's not even really a question, right? It's just it's a statement, and you're almost like not like if you ever watch like you're in, right, and you're like, what are they supposed to say? Like you're the boss, right? So and if you don't create a culture where people will push back and go, no, I'm actually not in. I don't understand it, or I don't think that's the right thing to do by the customer. If you don't create that culture, you either have to fix your language to make it easier for people to confront you and make suggestions about what's best for the customer, or best for the team, or best for the desired outcome, or really change your language so that it's more likely that people will make suggestions even if it doesn't align with what you're thinking.
So for everyone that's listening, right, debating whether to get the book or not, like for me, I've always encouraged input. I've always encouraged to challenge me, and I've said that forever, but the words weren't lined up necessarily with how they felt. And the best example I can give for that was, I would say, let me know if I'm missing something, and that's not a safe space. Versus like, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Yeah, that's a safe space.
Yeah, it's funny. I heard someone say before is that we don't just have to give people their chance to have their say. We have to give them the chance to be heard. Yeah. Right? Because going, hey, you got to give them their say. That's lip service, right? It's like, hey, man, I asked if anybody had any questions. I told you to tell me if I was missing anything. Like, what the heck? You actually have to give them a chance to be heard. This is what I'm talking about. Like earlier on when I said, leadership is the toughest thing. This is all we're talking about is leadership stuff. And as a visionary, assertive style person, to say to someone, hey, I'm not the smartest person in the world. I mess up all the time. I feel like this is one of the situations where I move really quick and I get everybody excited about a project. And then 3 weeks later, something smacks us in the side of the face and all of you guys saw it coming and I didn't. I feel like this could be one of those situations. Do me a favor. Tell me what I'm missing. Yeah. Right? Like, that does not feel natural to me. But I've seen the benefit of asking the question that way, and then literally someone will go, I'm glad you said something. I think this is a big mistake. If it turns out this doesn't happen the way that we want it to, this could cripple the whole project. Right? Yeah. Like Larry talks about that. Like, we don't fail, or we don't plan to fail. Like, we go into it and goes, if everything goes perfect, we'll be fine. Yeah. Well, how often does everything go perfect? Like, literally never. Right? And then everybody's scrambling and trying to figure out what we should do. So if you just have some contingency plans in place, right? And that will normally come from your staff when you give them the permission to disagree with you, you're going to reduce a lot of the fallout and complexity they have. And by the way, how much do they appreciate that when they're able to be heard? And the boss is saying, like, I'll tell them flat out, you're smarter than I am, right? I've just been here longer. That's why my name's on the sign, right? But I rely on you to tell me what I'm missing. I really need you to look at this from that side of the table and tell me what I'm overlooking or what could possibly go wrong here.
Yeah, the delivery is so
it's
important.
Sales. It's just like we I was talking with a friend of mine earlier about a tough situation that I had with my son. Shout out Camden Brewer. He might be watching right now. He's playing in a men's league basketball game with a bunch of 30-year-olds. He had the game-winning assist last night, and he told me he was going to tune in before he went to his game. But I had a tough situation with him, and I found that I was doing a better job leading the people at the office than I was my people at home. And I almost like, turned it off when I got home. It's like, oh, I got to be a really good leader when I'm at the office, but when I get home, they understand. They'll tolerate my crappy behavior. And I had an instance where I just wasn't being as good of a father and a leader as I needed to be with him. And you agree, right? That's the right thing to do, right? I was doing that. And I needed to give him more of an opportunity to tell me what was really going on. And turns out, long story short, he's going through his senior year at high school. He's probably a cuspy Division I scholarship athlete. And he's got a tremendous amount of pressure that he puts on himself right now, every single game, every camp, every shot. And I was applying more pressure, and it was not helping him. Yeah. And he just needed me to be supportive, well, I guess was the case.
I love that you're bringing home, like, the leadership part, and you can just turn it off when you get home. Because I used to think, right, like, I need to be on at the office, but I can just take it easy at home. And last week, my daughter, right? She's 11 years old, and she gets home, she just throws her backpack on the floor, right? Like it's just kind of what you do as a teenager, preteen, whatever.
Or a 46-year-old man. I throw my stuff around too, but
my wife's like, you need to go talk to your daughter and tell her this is not acceptable. I was like, well, I went back to her. I was like, hey, like, do you think that was acceptable? What do you think is the best practice when you get home? And have her create like the best, routine after she gets home. And then at that point, I'm reviewing it, not directing it.
Yeah.
And now it's a lot easier. So we originally connected through Collective Genius.
We did.
Right. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made was joining CG. And after I joined, you got moved up into the leadership team. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah. So it's actually one of the milestones in my life that I'm most proud of. And I came into Collective Genius really just looking for a way to generate more seller leads. Right, that was it. I went looking for, called a friend of a friend, Brad Chandler, who now is a really good friend of mine, a fellow CG member. And I was talking to somebody. I was like, man, I need to figure out a way to buy more homes. The MLS just doesn't cut anymore. You probably remember from our, first conversation when I started in 2006, all the way up to probably, 2015. I was able to buy 200 homes a year off the MLS and sheriff sale and short sales and, auction sites and all that good stuff. And I started to see that was becoming harder and harder. Profits were getting compressed. And so I'm working twice as hard, making less money. Generally just not my favorite thing.
Right.
And got introduced to CG, went to the first meeting. I was like, this is the place for me. They had direct mail providers. They had sales trainers. They had PPC guys. They had Facebook. And I was like, dude, this is like a buffet of bucks here. Like you just walk in and pay your $30,000 a year and you make 300. This is an awesome deal.
Yeah.
I was like one of the guys, right? I was hanging out. Always looked forward to going to the meetings. Would come with like one or two things I needed help with. And I always left with the answer to what I needed and created some pretty cool friendships along the way. But as I was in CG, I was going through, these other sort of seasons of my business where I needed to hire a COO and I needed to become a better leader and I needed to develop my people better. So as I'm developing as a leader, the Eric that showed up at CG looked a little bit different, right? From being one of the guys to being someone that might present on something that was impactful and maybe it more advanced than what other people were experiencing. And it was simply because of the success that I was having with the people that I was able to get to come work for me. And then I was able to create an atmosphere where they didn't want to leave. And it allowed me to be able to speak on that. It's like, hey, I've gone through this. Like one thing people always talk about in our business is like the instant they get to a place to where they have some money, they want to go hire a COO. Right? And it's like, first of all, there's a difference between an integrator and a COO. Most people's business need an integrator. The way that I see it is integrator, not so much leadership responsibility, COO, bunch of leadership responsibility. So I would tell you to get crystal clear on which one of those you need. If you plan on still being in the business and being involved in leadership, you can hire an integrator. If you want to step away a little bit, right, to go do other projects or maybe just to disconnect from the business, you need a COO. They cost two different prices and they're two different people, right? But what happened is I was able to talk about that journey with people and I was becoming a better leader. And CG said, hey, listen, we've kind of watched you evolve from this guy that, came in looking for leads to now people kind of look to you for advice when it comes to sort of all things real estate and leadership and business. And they invited me to be a facilitator, which means we run a room of 30 people that are there to get the most out of a meeting. It's a huge responsibility. And turns out I love it. I think I'm pretty good at it. It's given me the opportunity to speak on that main stage, which you've been arm in arm with me, and we delivered probably what I would say one of the top 10 like non-keynote presentations in the last 5 years that I've been around. where we encouraged 200 people to get out their cell phones and get active on social media. And that meeting, people were coming up to us like, dude, I just bought a 16-unit apartment building off that Facebook post.
It's crazy.
Rob Neidlinger now, right? That guy was like not on social media. We talked about him as a case study.
Now.
And he's all over TikTok. He's up to like 12,000 followers. And he's
awesome.
really good at it.
He is.
And when we first talked to him, he said, oh, dude, I don't really like to do it now. You know, he's all over my For You page.
Yeah.
So it has been life-changing for me. Being part of the group and then being asked to be part of the leadership team has introduced me to a mentor-style relationship with people in this real estate community. And turns out it's probably the thing that I was put here to do. I think positively impacting people by developing meaningful relationships and then leveraging my experience to help them through whatever phase of life or business that they're going through. Because business can be hard, man, and it can break you down if you let it. And I've been through there. I mean, I've been through sleepless nights where I was worried about my business.
Mm-hmm.
And how was I going to manage it? And if I'm going to hire somebody, and can I afford it? And are we going to make payroll? And that's tough.
I think there's a lot of people going through that right now as well.
Dude, it's and you know what? And we haven't created an atmosphere to where it's okay for people to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a bunch of entrepreneur, super assertive people. Outside of CG, I've never seen a place. But I was at the last Collective Genius, which, I mean, you got to figure this is back in June?
Mm-hmm.
It's literally when like stuff was popping off.
Yeah.
Rates were skyrocketing. Fuel prices are through the roof, right? We're like smack dab in the middle of Build Back Better, right? So everybody's there with their eyes wide open. Like, what is going to happen? There was so much attention at that meeting. Everybody was on the edge of their seat. And there was a big one of the owners of a major operation in there that I had a conversation with shortly after lunch about trying to navigate through this. And they were seeing their business change in real time. And at the end of the meeting, I turned around and he came up to me, he dropped his book bag and he hugged me. 6'3", 6'4", 50-year-old man. And he just sobbed. And I was like, whoa. What's going on? And he just, after he hugged me, he's like, man, just thank you so much. Like, I was just so, distraught about what I was going to do. And I just feel better. Like, everything's going to be okay. And he's like, will you talk to me once a week or so between now and whenever I feel better? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's just, so for me, that was the thing. Like, at the end of that meeting, it was probably the most anxious I've ever been to show up to a CG event because I knew how much it meant to people. The market was changing in real time. It felt like 2008. It felt like COVID when it first hit and nobody knew what was going to happen. And for a business owner, I mean, I remember when they shut my business down in Pennsylvania, I was scared to death.
Yeah.
Like, literally, you weren't allowed to go to work.
Right.
Right? Unless you had a waiver.
Pennsylvania.
Right? We don't get me started on that. This will get deleted if we talk too much about that, right?
So, and by the way, you and I, we had an opportunity to speak on stage together, and man, that experience, working with you, working with Benmont, right, gave me a whole new level of appreciation. What goes into making a main stage?
60 hours we measured. It's about 60 hours per person.
Yeah.
Right, so 60 man hours to prepare for one of those presentations. We spent a ton of time on that.
Yeah, but it was awesome. So since then as well, or since you were last on here, you sold your brokerage. So I shut down my brokerage.
Yeah.
Last week was officially the end of Stunning Homes Realty.
Yeah.
Right? We all moved our license over to Real. So you also, and not too long ago, also shut down your brokerage.
Yeah.
So
shut down my involvement.
Shut down your involvement. I apologize. Yeah.
So I was an active owner. I was an active participant, and I just, frankly, I mean, the real estate agent business is tough. It's very transactional. I think a lot of real estate brokerages and companies struggle to build a culture that's rooted in purpose that people actually buy into. And more so in the real estate agent side of the business, I've seen, like, I call them split hoppers. Like, they're constantly hopping from one brokerage to another because of the split, right? Or the transaction fee. And it's like, man, if we're literally going to have conversations about whether or not you're coming to work here because of a $395 transaction fee, or the difference between 75% split and 79% split, we just haven't created enough value in this relationship. Like, I don't want to worry about that at all times. And I had some really good partners in that business, all of which we still do a tremendous amount of business with.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be involved in that. I felt like it was something that was a distraction for me. And I'm probably leaving a tremendous amount of money on the table, but I haven't worried about it. I haven't talked about it. I haven't been part of a meeting in 4 months. And oddly enough, two of their top producers 60 days ago left.
Yeah.
For something very similar. Nothing happened, no big problem. Just like, hey, they came in, they knew nothing about real estate. They now are $7-8 million producers, and the value proposition looks a little bit different from them. They don't need someone to look over their deals. They don't necessarily need us to provide them leads. So I just feel like, particularly in that business, that it's just really, really hard, even more so than in our business, to retain talent.
Yeah.
Because they're all entrepreneurs. Like, they're 1099s, right? They like to come and go as they please. If you ask real estate agents, I bet the number one answer, if you were on Family Feud and said what the top answer was about why they get into real estate, it was flexibility of schedule.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which translates to, I might not necessarily want to work a lot.
Yeah.
So
well,
for me,
I
that was a big deal.
Because you sent me a text message just randomly, right? It's like, hey, what do you think about owning a brokerage? It's like, well, I already own one, but I'm closing it.
Yeah.
Right. And you texted me because someone had reached out to you. Right. And so there's a lot of people in our side, as far as the wholesaling side, is like, you know what? I'm going to open a brokerage and get another stream of revenue.
I think that was a loaded question that I asked you. I wanted you to say, not the best thing in the world. Right. So I think it's no different than anything else. I would tell you what I've learned now is, if you're going to do it, it needs to be treated as a different business unit, which requires a BUL, a business unit leader. It needs an integrator level style person to run that business, right? It's not a bolt-on business. It's not like, oh, we'll just send the leads over there and we'll get all this commission. Those people have a different client that they serve. They're paid differently. It looks very similar because it's a house and money, but it's different. So I think it's generally a good way to create ancillary income off of the leads that we create, because we're only going to, convert 10% of the leads that we get on average. So those other 90% certainly could be monetized through those relationships. But generally managing a brokerage at the broker level, not like in the Keller Williams model, which we're part of, they call it the mega agent, right? Where you are the person that drives all the listings.
Yeah, a mega agent makes sense.
Correct.
Owning a brokerage, not so much.
It's just, if you're paying a mega agent 90, like, what's left over?
Yeah.
And then you have all of the liability of the infrastructure, the building, like all of the liability that comes along with compliance. Like, the mega agent's the spot to be.
Yeah,
not so much the brokerage. But some people have figured it out and do a great job with it. In my market, our average home sale is only $240,000. So those commissions just aren't that lucrative. Out here, where you might pick up leads and be able to convert to listings on $700,000-800,000 properties, that might be the same as flipping a house. 3% on $800,000, $24,000. That's more than the average wholesale rep.
And you've also since sold your property management company.
Yeah.
So I know that you have always been a great operator in that department. So what was the mindset getting to that, or doing that?
It is. It required a tremendous amount of energy from me, because I'm just generally not naturally wired to do the precise work that comes along with property management. So I hired a bunch of really good people, but the skill set and the behavioral profile of that person versus mine are so opposite. It required a ton. There was a lot of healthy conflict in those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And then generally in property management, like the margins are just so low. And one of the things that I realized in property management is because the margins are so low, the normal person that they hire is paid an underwhelming wage. And when you have really hard work for people to do, like evicting people, handling maintenance tickets, like showing a house to 30 prospective tenants and only one of them qualifies, it's hard work. And you only pay $37,000 a year, it's just hard to get quality people.
Yeah.
And then when you do, they're not going to stay not for $37,000. So the right way I think, to run a property management company is actually to raise your fee. Because the one thing I can tell you in property management, the management fee is not where people lose money. If they have an unsuccessful experience with a rental, it's not because they paid too much property management fee on a $1,000 a month rental. At 10%, it cost you $100.
Mm-hmm.
One bad tenant cost you 6 months worth of rent, plus another probably 6 months worth of rent because they've trashed the place.
Yeah, rehab.
So poor management costs way more than expensive management. Right?
Right.
So if I were to build a property management company today, I would charge 15%, hire the highest quality people that money can buy. And I think you could actually build a property management company that charges 15%. You would get higher tenant retention. You could get people to pay more for rent because of the experience that most people move, not because they don't like the house, because they don't like the landlord, or they don't like the property manager.
They don't like the treatment.
Correct. So it was one of those things that in order to do it right, I think I had to scrap 100% of the model that had been built and start with a premium property management company that charges 15%. And I just didn't like the odds of that taking off.
Right.
And we sell a ton of turnkey. So I had a bunch of, 70% of our clients, we've sold, 500 turnkeys in the last 4 years. For me to move them from 7 or 8% to 15% would have probably just shocked them. So yeah, it was just one of those things. It's close proximity to our core business, but it served for me to be more of a distraction than anything.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of discipline, right? Because I've got massive shiny object syndrome. I mean, I'm always looking at new opportunities and so on, and you're actively closing some of these, not opportunities, but businesses that were bringing in revenue.
Yeah. So for me, though, to be clear, I transitioned the lion's share of the ownership and leadership to someone else. Didn't necessarily close them. I closed off the access to me.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I closed off the access to my most important people. So there's a good saying that I heard that says, don't put your best people on your biggest problems, put them on your biggest opportunities.
Yeah.
And the brokerage and property management were like our biggest problems. Like, man, we're not getting these listings and we should be doing this. And every listing we have, we should be able to get another buyer. And property management, if you don't do it correctly, you're going to upset the property owner. So it was a problem. Like, no one's ever said, how did you make your millions? And they said property management, right? Or brokerage, unless it's at the ownership level, right? Not the individual broker. It's always been the Gary Kellers of the world or the top of the food chain. And that was it for me. I was like, I can't have my best people on my biggest problems. I need to have them on our biggest opportunities. And that did not include the management of, and by the way, we have great partners for both of those. So nothing has suffered, and we've actually gotten better because we partnered with a property management company that was managing 5,000 units. And so we inherited all of their really good people, and they're actually able to pay people more money because they're managing 5,000 units. So 7% spread across 5,000 units is actually a lot of money, right? So they have really, really good people. We have a bunch of rentals of our own that are managed with them, and they've done a really good job for our turnkey clients. So I'm pretty happy with the decision.
And somewhere along the way, you started consulting.
I did.
Well, what's the thought process behind that?
So I think the best way to learn something is to teach it. right? Like for me, take for your example, like the best way to become a high performing salesperson is to teach sales, right?
Right.
Like, so for me, it started with actually social media where someone was doing it. I had FOMO, and like someone in my market was doing Facebook Lives, and I was like, man, why am I not doing that? So I took the leap of faith and I started doing it. And like after 40 days, I ran out of stuff to talk about, right? Because I talked about appraisals, I talked about septic tanks, I talked about, how to handle a change in terms, how to hire a real estate agent. And I was like, I got to talk tomorrow, and I don't know what to talk about. So that's when I started reading books 3.5, 4 years ago. And I was like, I'll just read a book, and if I learn one thing, I'll just teach that the next day. So it now put all of this pressure on me to learn. So everything I've learned in the last 4 years is because I felt compelled to teach it on my Facebook Live. So I start doing that, and then I start having people either through Collective Genius or just through social media that had reached out to me for advice. And I would help them. And I'd be like, hey, man, I'll help you. Let's set up a call. I'll do this. I'll do that. And I'd help them 2 or 3 times. And then eventually someone was like, would you just talk with me each week? And I was like, dude, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I got a lot going on. And I was like, well, what if I paid you? And, at some point, everything's always at least a little bit about the money. And coaching and consulting be very lucrative. So for me, I just kind of ran it through this internal filter of like, does this align with my greater purpose? And my greater purpose is to leverage my experience to build meaningful relationships, to positively impact the lives of people so that they can have belief in themselves that they can do anything and faith in others. So when you think about like, if I can spend an hour each week with someone, that need help with business or leadership or real estate, and can I leave an impact on that person? And the answer was yes. And I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I've had great response to it. I mean, some of the more meaningful relationships that I have outside of my family is some of the folks that I coach. Brought one of those young men with me today. You had a chance to meet him. And it was great for me because I've watched people in Phoenix, right? You guys were at the hub of the market changing. Like it was literally the leader. Like it rose the fastest and fell the fastest. And those guys are like 25 years old. And I'm coaching them. They're like, dude, we had $300,000 in our pipeline and it vanished overnight. Like literally everything that we thought was a $40,000 deal went to zero.
All right.
They had 15 deals in their pipeline that were scheduled to go to dispo that easily would have sold. They're smart, right? Didn't lock up bad deals, but each of those deals dropped in value by $50,000 to $80,000. It was vanished. Within 45 days, they were able to pivot with my help to now going back within 30 days to $140,000 in net profit on the books for the following month. So they went from heroes to zeros and back to heroes again in a 60-day cycle. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so the one thing about coaching that I think you got to be, or at least me, had to be aware of, and I put up a post last week and I was like, I'm going to take on one client. And so I ended up taking on 4, which is just classic Eric style, right? It's like I just kind of overcommitted myself, but I'll figure it out. But when they asked me why, I said, I don't know that I can sustain all of the wins and losses that come along with that. So for me as a coach, when you win, the great thing is I get the benefit of winning, right? It's like Steve did that $40,000 deal, or he hired this important person, or, he's been able to create more work-life balance because he's become a better leader. That's awesome. The downside is when I work with someone or I coach someone or I'm friends with someone, when they lose, I also carry that sort of baggage with me too. So it's inevitable that in business, people are going to have issues. And as their coach, what I've realized is their problems become my problems, and I haven't become great at disconnecting from that. And my own business and businesses require enough of my energy and have enough of their ups and downs. If I bolt on 5 more wins, that's awesome. If I bolt on 5 more tough conversations with my partner, breakups with my partner, months where we didn't hit our goals, tough personnel decisions where I got to hire or fire someone and I'm not sure to do, I absorb all of that. So I wanted to be pretty protective over that. But I made the decision to bring on 3 or 4 more people than I said I was going to do, and I'll figure it out, and it'll just be the next thing for me where I'll have to learn how to still care deeply about the results that I get for them, but be able to maybe disconnect a little bit better and not, live and die by their results. But I don't think that's such a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing at all. I mean, I think that's a great thing. It's a great quality. So when you were here last, we were talking about Novations.
Yeah.
And
you know what's crazy? Back then, nobody needed them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was asking somebody today. I literally had, I swear I can show you 8 Novations sales calls today about people that reached out to me. There's still people that reach out to me from this show a year and a half ago, and they'll say, I heard you on Steve's podcast. Tell me about this Novation deal. So I had like 7 of those. 5 people signed up for our course. Wow. And I was like, that show was a year and a half ago. Where have you been? And one guy's like, I didn't need Novations for the last 2 years. I could literally set a house on fire and put a sign in the yard and it would still sell. And I was like, okay, touche, good point. So a lot of people ask me, is this a good market to do Novations? The answer is absolutely yes. I've been doing them since 2009 was when I first did it, but didn't need to. 2011, it really became an important part of my business. So if you remember what the business was like in 2011, it was tough, really hard to sell a house, pretty easy to find a deal, right? So we started doing it in 2011, which is a lot like what we might be experiencing right now, right? It's just, there's a lot of speculation. Nobody knows if we've hit the bottom, if we hit the top, or what's going to happen. So there's uncertainty with buyers, which just extends the sales cycle. But it's funny that I did that show back then, and 1 or 2 people would reach out to me a month, and now it's literally 5 or 6 a day because it's. I think we're going to look back on this. It might be this show, and you'll see like when did Novations become popular? And I think you'll look back and they'll say it was July 20. What's the 27th?
I would say it was June because I mean I look at our analytics and Brewer Method is consistently trending on my analytics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, like the search and what people are watching and consuming.
They're consistently watching Leon Johnson with Creative Finance.
Yeah.
And Eric Brewer.
Well, Pace was just here and did. I mean, I've watched that 6 times now.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about sub 2, like you can start taking over some houses that don't have a lot of equity with 2.75% interest.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of people talking about it. Novations right now is a great way to try and close the gap between what you were doing maybe 6 months ago where the market was crazy and you could sell anything for 30 grand over list. And so what was your question? I'm sorry.
No, that was it. Just we're talking about it. And I'm going to open up the Q&A in just a minute. But before we do that, like we got Dan Bro involved now.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to have him kind of run the business of the Novations part where we're trying to help people, where we are helping people across the country execute Novations. So I think I'm really excited about that. So before we open up the questions, so like, is there anything you guys are doing right now to pivot for this, this shift?
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. It's a little nuts if you ask me, but I'm super duper. That's pretty corny, but I'm super duper excited about what we're working on right now. And it's funny, like, who always makes the money in a recession? The rich get richer, right?
Oh, 100%.
So who would everybody say they talk about, man, you got to stack cash, wait for things to go on deal. Like, okay, that sounds great, dude. But like, what do you mean stack cash? Like, in order for me to save $1 million, I got to make 4, right? So like, let's stop saying that for a second and stack cash. Like, I get it, right? We want to have a rainy day fund, but you got to produce enough money to actually save a bunch. So my idea was like, dude, if all these people that are worth $1 gazillion, right, capitalize on a down market, I don't have $1 gazillion. I got a couple bucks, but it's not $1 gazillion. So I can't make the type of acquisitions in the next 2 years if there's this opportunity that people think is going to happen to change the trajectory of my wealth and my family for the rest of my life. I can find the deals. I can rehab them. I can hire people. I can build a culture, but I don't have $1 gazillion. I wonder if the people that have $1 gazillion need someone to do those other 4 things.
Yeah.
So I've started strategic partnerships knock on wood, 2 of them will actually be consummated relationships with funds that manage north of $250 million, and the other one's north of $2 billion. And then what we'll do is we will find these markets or assets that when they go on sale can be purchased. And then these, by the way, these people don't buy them to resell them. They purchase them and then they stay in the family for 100 years. So our pivot is we're going to leverage our marketing, acquisitions, construction, property management, relationships to buy large assets or large pool of single family assets in markets that our strategic partners want to be in because of the economics, right? It's either a rapidly appreciating market or it's affordability is a big issue right now. Right?
Yeah.
Like you can't buy a house for less than $300,000 in 50% of the markets in the US, but you can in Pennsylvania, you can in Delaware, you can in Arkansas, you can in Mississippi. So there's still houses in Mississippi that are nice places you can buy for $100,000. So some people would say that home buyers will move away from where they want to live to where they need to live because of affordability.
Yeah.
And we've seen that, right, with Bruce Norris, who spoke at CG, who was mind-blowing. You're able to predict what's really going to happen in the market to a certain amount of accuracy just based on the economics. He's like, everybody would ask him a question. He goes, guys, it's just a math equation. If this lever goes up, this one has to go down.
All right.
Right? So our pivot is one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to lean into more coaching and consulting because I think right now as things change, people are going to need more guidance. They're going to need to tighten up systems. They're going to need more of a support system. So I would love to be that for a select group of people. So I'm personally doing more coaching and mentoring. And I also have the ability that our people are able to do that in small increments as well. So I'm able to pull in some of my folks, for a call here and there to help people support in that particular department if they need the help. And then aligning ourselves with folks that have $1 gazillion that want to capitalize on this fire sale that may or may not happen. Right. If anything, it might not be the fire sale, but it will be a small reduction. Mm-hmm. Right. And then what we saw was like every 20 years, like Jimmy Vreeland told us, real estate doubles in value. Yeah. So we just need to watch it drop back to probably where it was like in 2019. And then that's where I think you pull the trigger and you buy stuff in volume. And then when you look at 2039, that stuff should double in value if it repeats the cycle that it has for the last 100 years.
Exactly.
Right. So that's how we're going to pivot. And then just getting better at everything that we feel that we're okay at, just ratcheting up what we believe is acceptable. Buy a little bit deeper, get a little bit better at dispositions, make sure that our people are happy, make sure that we're keeping them incentivized, both emotionally and financially. We've always been pretty good. I want us to just probably be great.
Yeah. So we're going to jump into the questions. Before we do that, we got a quick promo video. So check that out. And then guys, ask your questions. We're going to answer all of them.
His sales training is unbelievable, right? There is other sales training in theory. Going through this stuff with how he breaks down his business is like invaluable because there's no other way to get this type of access with someone who's such an open book about every little thing that is completely applicable to my business.
Anyone who wants to bring their business to the next level, anyone who wants to close 30, 40, 50% more of the deals, there's no one who wouldn't benefit from being better at sales.
Anyone in real estate, anyone that has any entrepreneur that has a business, not all the information may be presented to you, but time management, knowing how to work with people, having sales skills, because I think we're all in sales and marketing, and it could present to anybody, honestly.
I would have to say it's asking questions. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to give an answer right away. And if you're able to, answer their question with another question. And also that along the process, it's going to be very uncomfortable talking to the sellers, asking the questions that you need to and digging for pain. But that's going to come with experience, so.
If you're struggling, I think this is David that you need to come to make sure that you take your business to the next level.
It's a good question. So glad you asked.
All right, so going into the questions here, we got a bunch of great questions. So on YouTube, we got Camilo Tatis. I'm in the Long Island market. How can Novations work in the New York market?
So everything in New York is harder, right? Actually, I met Dan Bro, and it is difficult when you're an attorney state. However, one of our best students that we taught the Brewer method to is Tommy Caffarella, who does business close by, also in an attorney state. And what we found is it's kind of like, and I always reference the movie 8 Mile, right? And you remember at the end where Eminem opened up with the rap where he dissed himself and he said, here, tell me everything. Tell them something they don't know about me, right? So that's what we do in New York. What happens is when you pitch a novation, the seller's like, yeah, man, this sounds great. Like, this is a great deal. I'm all on board. The attorney just absolutely lasers the thing, right? Like with a red Sharpie. No, 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 no. So Tommy calls me. It's actually on my Instagram. He posted or sent me a voice message with his Boston accent and was like, bro, I just locked up this weekend, 200,000 in novation deals. He called me the next weekend, was like, dude, 200 grand of my deals fell apart. What do I do? So we actually created, in the spirit of 8 Mile, which is one of the best movies of all time, a cover sheet for people in the Brewer method. When they take it to the attorney, we say, here's all of the things that your attorney's probably going to have a question about. Why don't we create a sheet so that you can answer when you guys meet why this program made sense to you? He went from 50% fallout rate to literally like 20% fallout rate. So in New York, what you have to do, because of being such a litigious attorney state, is you really have to arm your seller with the ammunition to be able to explain to the attorney why I'm choosing this option versus listing it or selling it myself, or, you know, going the conventional means of selling it. 100% can be done in New York. I just met with the the two brothers, Austin and Jake.
Yeah, the Draft Brothers.
The Draft Brothers, right? And they're in, they're like 25 minutes north of Manhattan, and they do business in Connecticut and upstate New York, and they're killing it with Novations. They have one of the best things I've ever seen them do, some young killers, right? They have in-house counsel. Like, they hired an attorney that works in their office. He's a W-2 employee. Completely changed their business. Because the crazy thing is, New York, is it takes like 6 weeks to get a title search back. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Attorneys are awful up there.
It's horrible, right? Like, you really have no say about when you're going to close. They'll let you know. So to answer his question, there is a way that you can condition, provide basically a cover sheet that goes with the deal. So when they take it to their attorney, you basically are nullifying a lot of the holes that are going to shoot in your deal, and then educating the seller on, hey, the attorney's going to ask you this. If he asks why you're choosing to do this, what would you say? Well, it's because I want to go this route. I don't want to list it. I don't want to make any repairs. No problem. We'll write that in here. So then we provide a cover sheet that goes to the attorney that cut his fallout rate in half.
Yeah, that's awesome. So follow-up question, or continuation of that question. How can I be protected in the event a homeowner decides to renege on the renovation after the renovations are done?
So here's the thing: when you learn about what we teach in Novations, is it's revenue without reno. We do not. So the renovation, fix and flip novation is like 2005, right? The way that we apply Novations is really quick. When you look at 100 net leads, good operators are going to convert about 10% of them. That leaves 90 people. 50 of those people not likely to make a decision to sell their home in the near future, right? Unrealistic pricing, unrealistic timelines, multiple executors, wife and husband not on the same page. 50 of them go into a long-term nurture campaign. They're not going to be converted. 40 out of 100 have decent properties with decent expectations that would likely sell to you if you could just put the right plan in front of them. So the novation deals that we're doing, and by the way, 40 out of those 40 deals, if you suck at sales and you don't present it to every customer the way you should, and you're not real good at follow-up, you'll convert 5% of those. Yeah. So that's 2 deals. Out of every 100 net leads, you should find 2 new deals. If you still stink at sales and you haven't paid someone like Steve to teach you sales, but you present it to every single customer, you should convert 10%. If you're good at sales, you present it to every customer, and you have decent follow-up systems in place, you should convert 15%. These are nice houses. You are not doing renovations. What you want to use as sort of your barometer is, will it pass an FHA appraisal? That's like the Mendoza line, sort of speak, right, from baseball terminology of where a novation start and stops. And these are people that are saying things like, Steve, that sounds really good, but I'm not in any hurry. That's great that you can close in 7 days, but I don't care if we close in 7 months. I'm not going to $1 below 100, and you're all for 70, right? So our form of novations appeals to almost 50% of the leads that you get. And they're people that generally have a little bit of motivation, but not the stress, and the property condition and their life circumstances condition are not weighing them down to the point to where they're willing to let it go at 50 cents on the dollar. So our style of novations does not include renovation, and it's a far more lucrative option than what I've seen with getting the property, renovating it, and then hoping that after you do a 50 grand reno that you're protected. I'm no moss on that.
Yeah, that's always a scary idea. Another question is, what payment structure or salary would you pay your acquisition/sales person?
So one of the things I think we do a lot of times when we start this business is we want everybody to be 1099 commission only. I think it sends a dangerous signal. It's like, I don't have the confidence in your ability to perform, so you're only able to make money if I make money. I think it's broken. I think you should hire acquisitions people, pay them $3,000 to $6,000 training salary, right? Because a lot of these people that you're hiring probably already have a decent job, right? So in order to get them to make the move to come over and work for you, if you hire them a, say, $3,000 to $5,000 training salary for 90 days where they don't have to pay it back, they can actually focus on learning the job and not be stressed out about making a couple bucks to cover their bills. Then what we do is we have a blended salary and commission percentage, and they can choose that. So if it's salary and commission, the commission percentage is a little bit less. For some of our more spirited entrepreneurs, they can go 100% commission. And then what we have is a 10, 12, and 15% payment plan for acquisitions. I don't mean to talk too fast, but I know we don't have a ton of time, and I think this is an important question. So if they generate $100,000 to $150,000 in monthly revenue, they get 10%. Once they go over the 150 mark, they go to 12% all the way up to 200. So they get 12% on the full $199,000.
Oh,
right. So it's a
it goes all the way
$4,000 bump. It's retro. Then once they go from 201 to 250, if they hit 251, they go to 15%. So if someone does $250,000 in a month, that 5% difference on $250,000 is $12,000. But they only get it if the team hits their goal. So the team has to hit $500,000 for the individual to get their individual bonus.
Interesting.
Yeah, right. So that's how I pay. But generally, I think across the industry, 10% is like the average for acquisitions agent. I would encourage you to have an incentive plan. So where if they push for and hit revenue numbers that are well above, or not well above, but reasonably above their expectation, that they should get some type of incentive, and 12% is a reasonable amount to share with them.
And the same question for lead manager.
So lead managers, we pay. I think today, in order to get anybody of reasonable value, you got to pay $20 an hour, right? So, and remember, these are sales positions. So I think for lead managers, you're going to be somewhere between $17 and $20 an hour, depending on the market that you're in. And then we pay a appointment bonus, attended appointment bonus, because that's their sale. So that's like an acquisitions guy getting a closing, getting an appointment for a lead manager or an inside sales agent is their sale. So we pay them for attended appointments. I think it's $25 per appointment. So if they schedule 15 appointments a week, that's a lot of money. And then they get $100 per closing. So if their attended appointment ends up in a closing, they get paid. So our lead managers can make $70,000, $75,000 a year, work 9 to 5, and not have the pressure of an acquisitions or a full-blown outside salesperson.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're talking about, they're selling appointments. That's one of the things that, we have our lead manager training program, something I'm doing with Jason Lewis. And the first thing we talk about as far as mindset goes is like, you guys are not setting appointments. You guys are not booking appointments. You guys are selling appointments.
Right.
So I love that you're using that same language.
Yeah.
On IG, we got Vicance. How do you hire a sales rep on commission basis?
How do you hire a sales rep on a commission basis?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not 100% sure how to answer that
Probably
question.
the question is, how are you sourcing them?
So it comes from social media for me.
Yeah.
One of the other things too, one of the more brilliant people I've ever met in real estate who's in Collective Genius, Phil Green and Eric Geidson, they get what they call forced referrals from their people. Like they literally sit down, their best salespeople, and go, I need 50 of your Facebook friends by 5 o'clock or you're out of here, right? It's like an old showdown. But literally, what we really do is we want to create employees that create employees.
Mm-hmm.
So I would tell you that probably 7 or 8 out of our last 10 hires at any sales position in the company has come from a direct referral.
Yeah.
So I would tell you to network heavily, which you should be doing anyway as a wholesaler or real estate investor out there. There's a lot of wholesalers that work for themselves that would love the opportunity to come work somewhere where they would have someone take on the lion's share of the ownership, responsibility, and stress. So one thing you can do is try and hire other wholesalers as employees. We generally shy away from that because we feel like they're going to leave us, but it goes back to what we talked about earlier. If you hire the right person and you lead and train them and manage them in a way that they don't want to leave, you got to eliminate the risk of them going out on their own.
And on IG, Metro Phoenix says, leadership is easy if you're a natural leader. If you're not all the books in the world, will not make people follow you. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's BS.
So,
I don't think there is such thing as a natural leader. I think there's naturally more assertive people.
Mm-hmm.
There's bossy people, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we identify them as a leader because of status or their position or title. But I don't know anybody that was naturally born with what we now know to be the humility that's required for leadership and the rare blend of that humility and confidence that you can conquer the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. We talk to a lot of people, a lot of successful real estate people. How many of those just said, man, I'm just a natural leader?
Mm-hmm.
It's the hardest thing. When you look at hot seats and what people present on what they need help with, it's always leadership.
Yeah.
I think it's hard. I think I'm a darn good leader right now. And I was definitely not a natural born leader. For sure.
I think I was a natural leader. But even though I was a natural leader, I was still horrendous at it. And I needed a lot. Like, I think I had the foundation.
Yeah.
But through sports and everything else, right? And then just people naturally wanted to kind of follow along where I was going.
Yeah.
But that only got me so far.
I think you have to develop it. That's the thing. It could be inherent, like it's in you, but it needs to be. Uncovered.
It's like, I mean, talent doesn't matter if you don't do the work.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I think maybe I had 10 to 15% of it.
Yeah.
But the books and the training and everything else, being surrounded by the right people, helps you become that leader.
Well, that's kind of like if you go back to like the old sports adage, right? It's like preparation beats talent when talent fails to prepare.
Yeah.
Right. So I think leadership would be the same thing. Is you can have the best naturally gifted athlete in the world. And when you typically look at the people that succeed and win world championships and go to the Hall of Fame and leave a lasting legacy on the sport when they're gone or the business when they're gone, it's because they've been able to develop as a great teammate or they've been able to develop as a leader that holds people accountable, but also, champions and congratulates them when they do even the most. One of the things I think we fail to do as leaders that I want to make sure I share because I remind myself of as often is a lot of times as leaders, we only celebrate or congratulate the great. And if I were to go into any organization, a lot of times I'll ask this business, what if everybody here just did 90% or 75% of what they're expected to do? Like, oh my God, like things would be great. I was like, so when someone does 75% of what they're expected to do, how big of a deal do you make of it? Well, we don't. They hit 75. But hold on for a second. You told me of everybody. So we don't celebrate Because often to hit 75% of goal, you had to give 100% effort. So I'm more going to congratulate the effort it took to get you to 75% than I am going to exaggerate the fact that you fell short of your goal. It's a slippery slope, right? Like, you got to be careful that you're not encouraging mediocrity. But again, the one thing that I can say is when you bring the right people in, and you've been very disciplined about that, that's off the table, right? I'm incentivizing a person that I know is the right person that did all of the right things, but came up a little bit short.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Rewarding the effort.
So I think leadership is the same. You could have naturally embedded leadership instincts, but it is something that really needs to be developed and practiced and constantly pursued.
I think I go back to, my example I always go to is Darius Miles versus Kobe Bryant, right? Because they were both on the cover of Slam magazine talking about, like, this is the future, and
nobody even knows who Darius Miles is anymore. It's
Darius Miles, like, dunked on Charles Oakley in a Michael Jordan camp. And, well, that was all talent.
Yes.
So, and the other thing, too, I wanted to say earlier, you were talking about how you hired all these people through referral. Gary Harper, he says, like, the best indication of the health of a company is how many people are referring within the company.
He told me that actually they started that staffing company as a lead generator for their leadership business. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, when people call us because they're struggling hiring, it means they have a leadership problem.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was a couple CG meetings ago, right? There was a keynote that said, you can't hire the right people until you become the right leader. So anytime someone says, man, I just can't find good people, chances are it's because you're not a good leader or you're not the right person. So,
which goes full circle to what you said in the very beginning, right? Like, as far as scaling, was that you learned that you weren't the right leader at that time.
Yeah.
Kimmel, another question on YouTube. In the process of onboarding with Bateman, Audantic, and Lamasu, and I'm a one-man show. So he's about to spend some money.
Yes.
He's a one-man show.
I mean, that's a $30,000 a month commitment we just talked about.
Who would you recommend be my first hire?
It depends on what you're good at. If you stink at sales and you don't like it, you may want to get some support there. I'm going to assume for a second, if you've just invested that kind of money into those resources, that you're probably pretty good at sales. My first hire would be probably one of two people, an administrative person that could take some admin duties off of my plate, and or a inside sales agent, because you're going to get a bunch of leads from those lead sources. Only 50% of them qualify realistically for you to make an offer and to pursue making a deal. So if you hire a lead manager, they can talk to the 100 people you get to month and whittle that list of 100 people down to the 40 most qualified people, where you, as the sales leader of the organization, should be able to close 15% of those. So either an executive assistant to help me with admin if you don't have that support now, or an inside sales agent to take all of those leads. Because with Bateman and Audantic, you're going to get a bunch of leads, right? But the reality is you're only going to convert 10% of those, but you have to talk to all 100 as if they are all a deal. You don't know where the 10 deals are in those 100. So you have to treat all 100 as if they're a deal until you know otherwise.
Right.
So I would say an inside sales agent / lead manager, when you're going to turn on that type of, because you could have leads coming in, and if you don't answer it live, call them back in 60 seconds and follow up 5 times every day for 7 days, you're going to waste all those leads.
Great by Choice. You read that recently.
Yeah.
And you made me reread it. So I'm close to finishing it. And you were right. There were things that, I've forgotten. And one of those principles was, fire bullets before cannonballs.
Yeah.
I think, Camilo, you might be firing a cannonball here.
Sounds like it.
Might be trying to do too many things.
To make that type of commitment without knowing who, or maybe they're just talking about their next logical hire. I mean, obviously, if you're able to make that substantial of a commitment, you've made some money. But I think it's okay to fire cannonballs, though, after you've fired bullets. So
Right.
there's a place for cannonballs, right? And for those of you that haven't read the book, bottom line is he talks about Great by Choice and companies that were great. One distinct difference between them and the companies that failed is they make empirical innovation. And empirical innovation for them means if they think that they should go do some data or some PPC, they spend $3,000, get a couple leads, and see how they convert, and then they go all in and spend 30 grand because they have empirical data that says, hey, listen, we're getting a 5x return off of that. We're now going to go all in and spend 50 grand a month on those same lead sources. So Great by Choice talks about bullets, how they're, low distraction, low cost, low risk. And low risk doesn't mean that it has a high probability to succeed. It means if it fails, it's not going to put you out of business.
Yeah.
It's a great book, by the way.
Jalabi on YouTube. How do I contact Mr. Brewer if I have a turnkey rental under contract for him to acquire under Novation?
Best way to get a hold of me is Instagram. We can post that in there. I think it's Brewer_invest. Or you can find me on Facebook. I may be getting close to 5,000 people, but you can follow me on Facebook. Or you can email me, eric@integrityfirstHomeBuyers.com.
Alexis Adams wants to know, how do you pitch a Novation agreement?
Do we have time for that? I can probably knock it out in a couple seconds.
Go for it.
Less than a minute. So here's the bottom line. If you know anything about negotiations, Steve will tell you that you had to lead with a price anchor. When you lead with a price anchor, behavioral science will tell you if someone was thinking 100 and you price anchor them at 30, you've modified their expectations about where they're going to end up. So you need to lead all of your wholesale appointments with a price anchor. If that person has made the decision that they've exhausted negotiations and your max allowable offer, let's say, is 70 and your client's is 100, what you're going to say to that person is, hey, Steve, if it's okay with you, I'd like to share a really cool program that we started not so long ago to help clients get more equity out of their home. I'm not 100% sure that this property in your situation would qualify. You might not even be interested, but it's called our Equity Protection Program. And really myself and the owner of the company realized that, and you might not know this, but 8 out of 10 people that I meet with say yes, they'd like to do a deal with me, but they say no to my price. And as a salesperson, that's hard. 8 out of 10 times I'm striking out, right? If I was in baseball, I'd get sent to the minor leagues.
Mm-hmm.
But so I sat down with the owner and I said, you know what? We got to figure out a way to pay these nice people more money for their homes. But I do understand that we need to maintain the integrity of the investment. I mean, we're investors, right? And first, the owner laughed at me and threw me out of his office and took away my preferred parking spot at the office. And then I just put my fist down and I'll go like this and I'll go, listen, we have to do this for 2 reasons. One, we have to help more people. And in our company, that's part of our core values, right? It's part of our purpose. So it's easy for us to say that and know that we mean it. And number 2 is, as a salesperson, like, I just can't strike out 9 times out of 10. It's just killing my mindset. It's hard for me to scrape myself up every day and say, all right, I'm going to come back in tomorrow and 9 times out of 10, I'm going to strike out. So we came up with this equity protection program, and it only requires 2 things from you. A little bit of flexibility on providing me reasonable access. We don't say showings, we say reasonable access, because showings is a listing, reasonable access is an investor relationship. And then we need access to put the property on the open market. We say open market, not MLS, because MLS sounds like, why wouldn't I just list it? Which is what 95% of investors, when I explain Novations to them, they go, why wouldn't they just list it? It's because we position and we pitch it. And then here's the other part. If you've done a good job over the course of your sales appointment, which is 30 to 60 to maybe 90 minutes long if you're in person, they actually should want to do business with you.
Right.
By not presenting them with an option that allows you to make a reasonable profit as an investor and get the money out of the deal that they need to have it make sense, you're actually doing that client a disservice. Matt Andrews, who works with us very closely, says the only reason you wouldn't do Novations is because you don't know how.
Right.
Right? So that's how you pitch Novations. And then Steve's heard me before, but I don't want to get too deep, is then I tell him that I'm basically going to bring the property to the market with 4 different options. As is, but because I understand construction, if someone comes to me with a problem, I can fix it. I've heard you say loud and clear, Steve, that you want to sell it as is, no inspections. The second option would be someone might want to come and buy this house from me, right? And they'll buy it the way it sits, but they want to do a kitchen. Now, that kitchen, they're going to know costs $15,000 retail. But because of my relationships with contractors and my understanding of construction, I can probably get that kitchen done for $10,000. Now I've made a little profit on the upgrade that the buyer selected. not on the purchase of the property because you've done such a good job squeaking all of that equity out of the deal. Third option would be is maybe they want a kitchen and they'd like that roof done. You and I talked about that it might last for 2 years, but it might last for 20. A lot of people in this price range are just going to want the security of knowing that that roof's going to last for 20 years. Same deal.
Yep.
They might think the roof costs $15,000, which it does, but because of my relationship with contractors and my experience in real estate, I'm able to get it done for 12. Now I've made another very small but reasonable profit on those upgrades, not the purchase of the property because you've done such a good job squeaking all the equity out of the deal. The fourth option is, and boy, I hope this doesn't happen because it's a really big pain in the butt, is they might come to me and say, Steve, I'll buy this house from you and I want it fully renovated, and you name your price. Problem is we're probably going to make good money on that, but it's going to take 6 months. They're going to show up at the job site every day. They're going to want to pick out literally every light fixture, and then 50% of the time something happens with the deal. They get upset and the deal's off. So we only do it if we get a really big deposit, and we're doing it well after you and I have settled up. Yeah. So if we do that and you allow me those two things I talked about, I can bring the property to the market with those 4 options. It gives me a distinct advantage over every other house that's on the market. Because if you go look at the neighbor's house, I'm sure it says, here's the price, here's the condition, take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. Where I'm saying, hey, pick your options, one of these 4, right? And then we put right in the public remarks, ask agent about possible renovations. And then here's the reality of it, 99% of the time we don't do any of those 4.
Right.
But we're open to it. And then when buyers come to us and they ask about renovations and we tell them we need a big deposit and we tell them we're only going to do the renovations after, they go, okay, we'll take it as is. Yeah. Right? So 99% of the novations we do, we only do punch list style appraisal repairs.
Ingrid Hernandez, she mentioned that she prefers sub-2 and retail subtail versus novations. She had an issue with it where the seller got kind of squirmy. So have you ever done subtails where you're doing sub-2 and retail?
I have not, but in my experience, it's much easier to get someone to work with me. And again, I think one of the things that we got to clarify is up until we've really been teaching and preaching this version of novations, what everybody else has done before is not the same. Right. Right. It's just so. I would tell you to revisit novations. Your experience previously might have been negative because of that form of novations, which included rehab and all that stuff. But like, if I'm looking at it from a consumer perspective, I'm much more likely to be squirrely when I'm trusting you to make my mortgage payment for 12 years than I am saying, hey, we're going to settle up in 90 days and I need reasonable access to be able to bring this property to the open market in the next 90 days. You shouldn't have too much trouble with sellers getting squirrely. Particularly if you're being very transparent. And that's one of the things I love about novations is I'm saying, I already told them I'm going to list it. I'm going to try and work one of these 4 deals, and I'm going to do my best to make profit on someone that comes along and makes me an offer to buy your home. There's zero confusion about what my plan is when that property goes on the market versus the normal wholesale where it's like I'm bringing my partner or my contractor, and it's this sort of gray area song and dance about whether you're actually buying the home. Do you really have the cash? Are you going to settle on time? So one of the things I love about novations is it's very transparent, and sellers generally just don't get squirrely.
Right. So that's all the questions I see here. I want you to think about a message you want to leave all the listeners with.
Okay.
And then we have just a couple of quick announcements. So guys, you guys already heard earlier, we got Sales Disruptors, day and a half in my office talking about sales, our sales process. And you're going to get to meet everyone in my office, see them work real time. So, we're not just talking about it. Tomorrow, Eric and I were doing Pardon the Disruption, right? We got that with RJ and CJ. I don't even know why we have them. It should just be you and me.
I mean, fluffers.
And then we got this Friday, I'm doing my very first show with Paul Sparks. We're going to be doing Certainty Talks. So that's going to be our first show this coming Friday. So what are some last thoughts you want to leave all the listeners with?
Man, that's tough. I feel like I've given you all I had in the last hour and 20 minutes. I don't know. I mean, I want to try and come up with something like cool and trendy to say, right? That maybe shocks people. But I think it's just keep going. You know, I can remember a time in my business. I can remember a time in my parenting journey. I can remember a time in my fitness and health journey where I just wanted to quit. And I would just encourage people to keep going. Seek counsel. Sometimes that shows up in different ways for different people. That may be spiritually, where they're finding some peace and some guidance through the church. Sometimes it's, you and I have become great friends, and there's been times where you've given me some sage advice that might not at that particular moment had the impact that it was intended or designed to have, but 6 months later it resonated with me because I was more receptive to what was going on. You told me a year and a half ago or so, or maybe a year ago, we sat down and I was thinking about all this stuff, and you actually challenged me to do what I'm doing now. You're like, why wouldn't you do it yourself? Like, you can do whatever you want. People like you. You know what you're talking about. Why would you go this route? That seems small. You basically called me the P word. And at the time, I fought back. I was like, no, dude, you don't understand. And then once I got through that phase of what I was going through, that was actually right when I lost my COO, and I was distraught, right? So when you challenged me to think big, it was like, dude, I'm in preservation mode. So just being part of a community, being part of a group of people, a lot of times as real estate entrepreneurs, we force ourselves to walk that path alone. And we feel like we can't talk about our problems or our emotions. And I would just encourage you to keep going. And this may surprise you to hear from me because you met me a couple years ago, but just love on people, man. Like, if you love on people, it's amazing the results that you can get out of those relationships. And I've really started to just give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't ask for people to earn my trust anymore. I extend them that trust, and then just keep a close eye on whether or not they're a good steward of that. And so that would be it. I would just say keep going, love on people, and you can find the answers that you're looking for. You're almost always just one relationship away from everything you've ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
And that sounds pretty profound, right?
Yeah. Well,
that was okay.
It's absolutely true, right? And we found each other through, being in a community together.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your kind words. And it goes both ways, right? Like, I've called you.
I was hoping you would point that out because it's probably a little skewed. I think I've given more to you than I've received. But no, it's you're right. I mean, and you know what? And Larry will tell you this, right? He says when you're vulnerable, it means that you can acknowledge your weaknesses and admit them. And that creates the opportunity for people to help. And then here's the deep part. Helping people is like crack to people, right?
It is.
So when you become vulnerable, right, you give people the chance to help you. And when that's the paradox, right? Let's end on that note. As a leader, we never give ourselves permission typically to admit that we're wrong or we need help. I got to be big and strong and no one can ever see me be vulnerable. When the reality turns out it's the exact opposite. The more vulnerable you are as a leader, the more people will help you, which means now you have 10 people working on something versus one, right? And it builds that trust, which if you read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it's one of the best books ever written that'll help you build a business. The foundation of results is trust. And that's where we get things like commitment and healthy conflict and accountability. So, yeah, man, this is one of the more meaningful relationships in my life. I consider you to be a friend. I'm so thankful that you had me here. I had a lot I wanted to uncover and get out about what's changed in my life since the last time that we spoke, because I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah.
And I also just want to encourage people. I'm glad you asked that question. I wasn't prepared for it. You put me on the spot a little bit, but I just want to encourage people to keep going. And that's part of why I'm coaching and mentoring and why I'm so excited about my role at CG, because it gives me the ability to give them sometimes that little nudge that they need to not give up. And for me, if I'm able to help enough people by the time I leave, not here, by the time I leave this earth, that's how I'll measure whether or not, I did a good job.
I think we should include that one particular slide of my picture with Eric Brewer.
What? Which one?
The picture of Eric Brewer.
Yeah.
The
We could just-
chemical.
No. I need to sign something as part of this. Like, you can't distribute this content unless that picture never resurfaces again. I think it's only fair as a 2-time guest. How many 2-time guests have you had?
You don't want the answer to that question.
A lot.
Yes.
Okay, I feel like crap now. So I'll be back in 3 months, and then I want to know how many 3-time guests that you have. But no, man, I really appreciate you having me here. You got a great platform. I've met some extraordinary people just through folks that went back and or listened to this from a year and a half ago and have reached out to me because something about that conversation resonated with them. And again, helping people is like crack to humans. So every time someone reaches out to me and was like, man, I heard you on Steve's show, and what you said about coming from the car business or doing this or doing that really helped me. And I just reached out to you to tell you thanks. It's almost as good as money. It's not quite as good. I mean, I always like to get a paycheck, but it's a close.
I do think it's better than money.
You got to have both, though.
You got to have both.
Yeah, you
gotta
can't
have both, but you only need $75,000 a year
to be happy. Everything above that's a waste.
Yeah,
you're right.
So perfect. All right. So thank you so much. Pleasure as always, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. And Eric will be back again to score 0 points. See you guys next week.